I'm Andy Agathangelo. I'm very proud to be running a certified social enterprise that's based in the UK, but has people involved in 21 countries around the world, including, for example, Paul Bates, a barrister licensed in both the UK and Canada. Paul's with us tonight. Always nice to have folks from outside the UK involved in our events. The purpose of the Transparency Task Force is to help improve standards of conduct in the financial sector. Over the years, more and more of our work has been about exposing malpractice, misconduct, malfeasance, mis-selling, and even outright fraud. And unfortunately for Wayne and his family, tonight's event is about that kind of thing. A fraudster who, it would seem, was allowed to go rogue and run riot, despite the fact that he was actually an employee of Bank of America when he was doing all this. And despite the fact that he used his made up Bank of America profile as a vice president to help him commit the frauds. Despite all this, Bank of America so far seemed to be turning a blind eye to what actually went on. And Wayne and his family are understandably absolutely committed to helping expose not only what happened, but also how Bank of America has been handling things ever since. Transparency Task Force is essentially a collaborative campaigning community of people who are unwilling to accept the status quo, a status quo that we see being characterized by financial crime victims of all kinds being denied access to justice, redress, recompense. Inevitably, this causes a terrible impact on their lives. Sometimes also their businesses. Many people have had their businesses destroyed by the kind of banking misconduct that's become so well known. Wayne is going to explain himself, the background, what happened, where he's at with Bank of America, and so on. We'll make this as inclusive a conversation as we possibly can. That's important. It's a conversation amongst us all. And no doubt once Wayne's sort of set the scene and cover the ground he wants to, he's going to use a few slides. We'll turn this into a Q&A. What we really want, folks, is candid, grown-up conversation about what's happened, how and why Bank of America have behaved the way that they have, whether the victim gets properly supported, and all kinds of other nooks and crannies, such as email, software, and whether organizations like Bank of America have the right kind of security protocols in place, have the right protocols to weed out potential bad employees, and lots of other stuff as well. Before we do anything else, I want us in a moment to show our appreciation in the traditional way for Wayne and his family for taking on the fight, the struggle, for standing up rather than standing by. It would have been so easy just to deal with the consequences without fighting back. But that ain't Wayne Johncock. That's not the man we've got to know and like a lot over the last year and a half or so. Can we please show our appreciation to Wayne and his family for doing what they're doing? Because not only are they doing it for themselves, they really, very authentically are doing it to try to help others get hurt the way that they have. Wayne, over to you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andy. Thanks very much to everyone for taking the time to come and listen to the story I've got. Yeah, they're very kind words, Andy, and I must say, I think what I want to get out of this is just another. It's a step for me to talk about this. I still can't believe it. It's really happened. It's been going on for many years now. I think there's a lot of things that have really shook me, and those things include things like the way that I've been treated by the authorities who I thought would be helping me. Um, I don't think I can name one of the authorities who have acted in the way I thought they would act, or how I how I was expecting them to act, and that's been a very, very difficult thing to swallow. But as I go through, I'll show some things. I think Andy, generally, I think I show somewhat a jovial and a positive outlook on the exterior, but I can assure you that I fight some pretty intense inner demons with all this, and that's also hard to face. So I suppose we've got the documentary that's been out. We've had two documentaries that have been done, and overall, I think they've been excellent. They've told the story pretty well, but again, it's had no real impact on like the Bank of America, the FCA, the ICO, that they just refuse to comment, which annoys me. It annoys me a lot, but I don't know what we can do to change that other than just keep getting the word out. I think that's the thing. I did go and watch several days of the post office hearing. I've got to know some of those post office people, and I in no way can compare what I've been through compared to what they have. But I couldn't believe how they were treated and what happened in the whole justice system. But as I've started to touch on it, I've really found out some things that I just can't believe. So I don't know if I can. I'm going to try and share my screen, Andy, and I'll take it off soon. I copped this very friendly banter from the people in the TTF about Wayne's World. I've done a very quick mock-up, as you can see, about Wayne's World. When the movie came out, I thought it was one of the worst movies I've ever seen, but I've kind of gravitated to it a bit more just because of the name. That's my face there, and my wife's there. If she sees this, she's going to absolutely yell at me again. But anyway, and the other thing, I'll just go through this. I won't have these slides up all the time. Uh, but what we have become, um, it's been called Mr. Johncock versus the Bank of America, and this was suggested by the people who did the last documentary. They weren't prepared to name it publicly, but it does strike a chord somewhere. And I think, as you can see there, truth and honesty versus lies, deceit, and crime. This fellow, and we've got Gerard on, who's my business partner on the educational technology app we were building. Gerard's in Australia. It's 5 a.m. in the morning for him, but he's shown so much resilience and support uh, on this, and he actually met this criminal here. So there's that one. Then if I go on, this was another promotion done by Seven News in Australia. The person who did this for me is kind of the equivalent of Fiona Bruce. So probably the top reporter in Australia. That was a 2 minute news item, which was good. What has annoyed me, and I don't know if you can see all this, Andy, but this is the chief executive officer of Bank of America, Brian Moynihan. I think his pay a year or so ago was somewhere around 32 million. So these people do get remunerated quite well. The code of conduct, which is like the Bible for the Bank of America, how responsible they are, how they um, are very ethical, how they are very honest in their dealings, how they manage risk well. Um, I couldn't believe this when I read it. If you go to the next one, Andy. I think you see here their values are, well, act responsibly, trust the team, everything they say in here. And I know I've only found one person who um, has been a criminal in Bank of America. As I go through, I simply don't believe he's the only one in there. It's too big an organization, and the way that their controls have failed for whatever reason, we don't know. They won't tell us, but there's no way there could be one person who's been able to do this. If you go on to the next one, Andy. So our culture comes from how we run the company every day by acting responsibly and managing risk well, which includes our commitments to honest and ethical behavior, acting with integrity, and complying with applicable laws, rules, regulations, and policies. Goes on to say how they ensure all of their employees are trusted, they work in the right way. I can tell you absolutely now, they and I'll say it out front. They won't like me saying this, but they have not been honest. They have not been ethical. As far as I'm concerned, they have hidden stuff from me. I do know cyber laws. I was a CIO at Centrica. I had information security and cyber underneath me as a responsibility. Um, I deliberately seeded terms in the 200 emails that went in and out of their systems. We know they went in and out of their systems. That would trigger an alert. No alert was triggered, so that made me even more convinced that the scam was real, that the whole thing I was doing was real and it wasn't a scam. Um, I still don't know how this fellow was able to bypass all these controls. If you go to the next one, Andy.
Just on that particular point, just before we move on, Wayne, I hope you
Yeah.
don't mind chipping in every now and then. Is it your general belief that it would be so embarrassing for the truth of how bad these controls were at Bank of America? Is part of your thought that they are doing what they can to not let the truth get out into the open because it would be such an embarrassment to them that the Bank of America has such lax internal risk management and control systems? Is that part of your thinking?
Well, I'm trying to sort of structure my thinking so I can come up with something that's reasonable and logical. This is a company who have put $35 billion into the technology systems. They have one of the most secure, one of the most sophisticated, one of the most well invested technology systems on the planet. They have 3,000 people in their cybersecurity team. They have won awards for being best in the United States, best in the UK at managing risk and understanding cyber risks. They have $1 billion budget per year. And the way this fraudster was able to do this is very, very, very primitive. It was all done by emails. Now, if they have such lax security, Andy, there'd be hundreds, if not thousands, of employees doing this and getting away with. Remember, he went on for years, and he it seems he didn't raise any concerns at all because he told me, let's keep an audit in all of our emails. So everything was tracked, how it worked, how the investment worked, where I had to put money. He doctored emails, which all went through their system to say the head of legal, the head of compliance had given approval on this. Um, I, they can't get away with this if it's so blatant. The ICO, that's the Information Commission Office, who regulate and police data security. I would have thought they'd be all over this, but because breach of data protection can result in up to a 4% fine of global revenue. Bank of America do 100 billion, so it would be 4 billion. They have not gone anywhere near this, and the very basics have been breached. You must process data lawfully. You must protect personal information. You must advise the ICO if there's a breach that's happened. None of that's happened, and I just am so confused. Would they be embarrassed? I reckon they would be embarrassed, but I think it'd be more embarrassing if it came out that they had these breaches and they tried to cover them up. Because
Yeah.
it's also under Data Protection Act, and believe me, I know this data protection stuff far better than I used to. Data Protection Act 2018, Section 198 says that uh, directors of body corporates can, if they're found negligent, can face criminal charges. The ICO have never implemented that clause in
It seems to me there's something serious going wrong here in terms of corporate governance and risk management and systems and controls.
Yeah.
Wayne, carry on. I'll move
Okay.
from. Oh, thank
Go
you.
to the next slide.
Yeah,
So these are three very, very senior ladies in the Bank of America. The top one, Catherine Besant, she was the Chief Operations and Technology Officer. She was the lady in charge of all the technology. She's left now, gone somewhere else. But again, she would have been on a massive millions and millions of dollars per year. She had no idea what was going on, it appears. But this is what they say, that like duty to report arrests, duty to act ethically. We are fair and honest in our communications. We value each and every teammate. The list goes on, and it is all rubbish. Go to the next one, Andy. They spend $1 billion per year on cyber security. I don't know what they spend it on, but if 3,000 people can't catch this person, because the way cybersecurity works, every time there's a breach, that gets reported on a register, and that register is reported daily. It goes to the Security Operations Center. This person was bypassing the rules and the controls so much his name would have been at the top of the list. So somewhere that list has been, or the names on it must have been suppressed because it would have appeared on that list. The cyber security, all the tools in technology are so brilliant nowadays. They don't fail. If there was a systemic failure in these tools, it would be happening across every company who run these tools, and that doesn't happen. Go to the next one, Andy. Interestingly, and Gerard sent this through to me, HSBC in Australia were fined um, by the Australian regulator, the Australian Securities Commission, for basically exactly what Bank of America have done, and that is not have controls around the systems. A KC wrote an opinion for me. He stated clearly, where are the controls to stop this from happening in in the Bank of America? The Bank of America in their annual report tell the world how great they are at having controls in place, how their 3 levels of sort of inspection and investigations all over all of this stuff. No, none of these things have worked. So this is one thing I'm going to bring up with the ICO and the FCA. The FCA have completely gone missing in all of this. I would have thought this is a prime case to clean up our act a bit. The Bank of America, well, the criminal have he admitted to everything. So I can't see what the Bank of America are trying to hide. He admitted to everything and he's now in jail. He said, yes, he did it all while he was an employee. He did it on their premises. He did it using their software, their laptops, all that stuff. So other countries are doing this. I don't see why we can't do this here in the UK. If you want to go to the next slide, Andy. Yeah, so I took this off, like I said, the post office victims. What's in my idea, if the ICO were to act properly, uh, and it is in the regulations, they could enforce a fine here. They seem very reluctant to enforce any fines. It is catered for. It would prove to be an example to the rest of the world that we take data protection and especially protection of personal data seriously. They wouldn't have to do the 4%. That might be a bit rough, but they could do 1%, which would be $1 billion, and that would go into the consolidated fund. But why not use that money to pay the post office people? and whoever else is out there. I'm just amazed they don't even go anywhere near that. And if they did that, it would catapult the UK to like the top of recognition for having strong data protection laws. That they won't do it. I'm just confused. Another thing that angers me. Next one, Andy. So, what keeps me going? I can tell you now, my wife is sick to death of all this. She hates it. Um, it's just being out there and facing it all the time. We're frightened about brown envelopes that come through the letterbox from HMRC, threats on us to repossess our home, threats to make us bankrupt. But this is what keeps me going. It's my family, uh, my love for them, um, my wife, my kids, my grandkids, my friends, life in general. As you know, I really love life. Um, and as bad as the demons are, uh, that this is what blocks all them out. So this is a real strong thing for me. Okay, Andy. So I think that's probably enough on the slides. If you want to go back to, yeah, thanks everybody. I was going to use that as my last slide, but thanks for letting us tell the story. So I suppose, if you don't mind, Andy, you wouldn't mind letting Gerard have a talk, because Gerard and I have been friends for 40 years. We've been in business for probably over 30 years. We were actually very, very successful with our first lot of educational software on spelling, grammar, and maths. We sold to a third of the schools in the United Kingdom. This is on the days when CDs were out. 75% of schools in Australia were enormously successful. The structure of how technology was charged for in those days is a little bit different. Back then, we didn't make millions or billions out of it as a successful software entrepreneur would have done. But if in today's language, we would have made tens of millions of pounds, and it's a global product. The other thing that really gets me, it was perfect for COVID, working from home, um, doing schoolwork from home in a remote sense. It also was structured in a way to provide people with a business to run themselves. People would have picked that up. We've lost a huge business opportunity there. And again, the Bank of America just crushed that. They said, oh, no, you wouldn't have done any good. Was a stupid idea. I'm just so furious about it. So if you don't mind, Gerard, do you want to come on and say things? Gerard's in Penguin, Tasmania. As you can see from the background, that's actually what the front of his house looks like. It's a brilliant place. Do you want to go off mute? There you go.
Thanks, Wayne. Now, I'll just say in the outline, I really do admire Wayne's resilience in this whole episode. I think it was me, I may have well have given up by this stage. He's hit so many brick walls. The impact on me, has, especially emotionally, has not certainly been anywhere near what it has been to Wayne. It's been more a financial and lost opportunity that has impacted me. I know Wayne, the perpetrator of the fraud, Ragesh Gedia, befriended Wayne and virtually was in contact with him every day for 15 months. And it was that, as well as the financial implications, it's that loss of trust. And he was such a convincing liar that that obviously would have had a huge impact on Wayne. And the fact that the Bank of America have just played hardball the whole way. They've put a top London legal firm in between them and Wayne, and they've basically been saying, go away, you're nothing to do with us, you weren't a client of ours, you'll get yourself in trouble, basically. And he's had to put up with that even though he's had the satisfaction of exposing the fraud, having the fraudster jailed for 6 years, 9 months, it has had an enormous toll on him. And I really do admire his resilience to keep going. Now, very briefly, I've got in front of me seeing I'd made contact with Gettier, the City of London Police asked me to do a witness statement for the court case, the charges against him. I've got that in front of me. I don't intend going through everything there, but very basically, as Wayne said, we had a reasonably successful educational software business. We had very good sales in Australia and the UK. We were probably always a bit undercapitalised. We produced 6 good CD-ROM products that were very well accepted into the school market. We probably should have moved a bit earlier to move our content on to online. But as I say, we were probably a little bit undercapitalised most of through our development phase there. So basically the business pretty much went into recess when you virtually couldn't give away a CD, let alone sell it. And that happened very quickly in the early 2000s. We always had this idea of developing an online educational platform. I think it was in probably 2014, we engaged a project manager who had worked with other developers in India, and we set about developing this educational platform. Now, even though the people that we had working there put a lot of effort into it, did a lot of work, they really weren't the people, they weren't multimedia developers. There's quite a difference between. So what we ended up with, I think, was a product that wasn't fully completed and it was disjointed. And I showed it to one of my sons, has a double degree in fine arts and information systems. He had a look at that website that we'd had developed and he said, "Do you want to know the bad news? That if a first-year university student handed this in as a project, they'd probably fail." Now, it wasn't through the lack of effort. It was just, I think, that we were working with the wrong people. So basically, I was pretty disheartened with this. And I actually resigned as a director of, we'd set up a company called Super Learning Series in London. And for 12 months, I resigned as a director. I think it was in 2019, Wayne contacted me and said that he had somebody who was interested in investing in the Super Learning Series. I was quite amazed by this and, obviously overjoyed by it. And so all the way through 2019, at the end of each quarter, Wayne was gearing up for this money to be available for the development. And in that time, he was convinced, and I can see why he set about having what we'd had done in India totally redone and drawing up a brief for graphic design agencies in London. Some of the biggest agencies in London were interested in taking on the project. At the end of each quarter, Wayne would inform me that the funds weren't available, there were compliance issues and so on. Wayne had been telling me he'd been meeting this Gettier who worked at the bank in a coffee shop. And I was saying, are you sure he works in the bank? You know, like you're meeting him in the coffee shop. And Wayne said, well, the coffee shop is in the bank. You've got to go through security. And I was thinking, well, maybe there's something here, but I was still sceptical to some degree. And especially my son, Matt, when he got the name, he did quite a bit of research, and he was sceptical from day one because Gedia, the position that he claimed to have in the bank, which was vice president and head of the derivatives trading desk, I think, for the Middle East, he virtually had no digital profile at all. And my son, Matt, said somebody in that position would be on LinkedIn, they would have a lot of other, they would have a profile, and it appeared as if he'd gone to the nth degree to not have a profile. So that raised alerts for my son. Early 2020, I was going to Europe, and it was in March, and I decided to meet with Wayne and meet with Ragesh Gedia. And it was the week that COVID hit, the pandemic. And the day that I arrived, which I think was the 14th of March 2020, basically countries were starting to close their borders. And even that first day that I arrived on the Sunday, I intended being in Europe for 6 weeks. I rescheduled my flight to return at the end of the week. And so in that week that I was in London, on the Monday, myself, Wayne and Ragesh Gedia met at a coffee shop in Sunningdale. Is that right, Wayne?
Yeah, it's Virginia Water.
Yeah, right. And he was so convincing, and he turned up in I think it was a black BMW. And I can remember Wayne saying, oh, you turn up in a different car every time. And he had this story that the car had been given to him by the representatives of the Qatari royal family who he used to deal with in a previous job. And he, like, it was, so we had this meeting over a coffee, and he asked me what I thought it would take to get this development up, to redo the whole thing and establish the platform. And I said I really couldn't put a dollar figure on it, but it was a big build, because we had a whole system of e-commerce on it. A lot of that work Wayne had done. It was an enormous build. And he just casually said to me, well, there's another 2 million there if you need it. I'm thinking, I can't believe this. And he was just so believable. And the other thing that started to convince me that Wayne, and through Ragesh, those 2 meetings that I had, that there were other people who I knew and had contact with. The solicitor who had drawn up Super Learning Series, he'd been into the bank and through security. Another investor had been into the bank. There were other people that Wayne had, business associates and so on, had been into the bank through security. So it convinced me, well, he definitely worked at the bank. And, you know, like, and he was such a convincing liar, really, that I returned. I met him again on the Friday. On the Friday, this is how quickly things had moved in COVID. On the Monday, we were sitting in this coffee shop. On Friday, the sitting area was blocked off and we could only get takeaway coffees. So we each had a coffee, and Wayne was saying to Gedia, we need to get a photo. Jared's going back tomorrow on the plane we'll get a photo. And looking back, he was resisting getting in the photo because a young employee of the coffee shop was trying to keep us a couple of metres apart because of COVID restrictions. Anyway, I said to Gettier, come on, we can just get a photo. So he very reluctantly, we got a photo, and that is the only photo that the police had of him, was that photo with me. He'd gone to the nth degree not to be photographed and not to have a digital profile. Anyway, I returned to Australia on March the 19th, and March the 31st, which was the end of the first quarter of 2020, the money was going to be definitely released. All the compliance issues had been done. So I came back as confident as that the development was going to go ahead. We had these large digital agencies who'd put a lot of time into bidding for the work, and if the money was going to be there, we were underway. Wayne had a good team of people working for him, and this is where Wayne has incurred a huge amount of expense, right, which has never been recompensed by anybody, right? All of that, thinking the money was there, and which I can fully understand why you would think going into the bank. He used to turn up apparently with a vice president badge in the bank when he turned out to be a project manager. Anyway, what happened after I got back, so I'm 100% confident, as much as I could be, that the whole thing was going to go ahead. Towards the end of March, Wayne contacted me and said Ragesh Gettier had been in contact with him. We need to put another $10,000 in for, I think it was called currency.
Yeah, he came up with some weird name.
Something. Anyway, I was so convinced. I sent the money off to Wayne. I didn't want things to be held up. At the end of the 31st of March, the money was not available again. Gettier's reason for that was that the bank had brought in, they'd closed down all accounts, and they'd brought in a risk management firm called Bruckman Rosser, who were going through the accounts, and it could be some time before the account would be closed and the funds would be available. I got Wayne to send me on some of the emails which appeared to be coming from Bruckman Rosser. I passed these on to my son, Matt, who's got the IT background, who looked into the source code of those emails. And previously the emails were coming through the Bank of America system. And what he discovered in the source code, that domain name Bruckman Rosser are a big American liquidation firm, not so much into risk management, which alerted, there were some red flags there. But what Matt found, that Bruckman Rosser domain name had been registered on the 29th of January 2020 in Middlesex, and we'd already traced that Gettier had been the director of an IT company called ClickLogic in 2001, and he was living in a house in Middlesex with a number of other people. And this property identity services, I think they were called, had registered a whole lot of fairly dodgy websites. And that was the company that had registered Bruckman Rosser. And he was using that to emanate an email, and it as if it was coming from this Bruckman Rosser. So we knew, well, especially my son knew, that the thing was a scam, which was a huge shock to me and obviously to Wayne. But the forward thinking of Gettier, knowing that possibly the pandemic, that COVID was on the way, the end of January, to register a company to then have an excuse as to why the funds weren't available on 31st of March. It just shows the level of deceit and forward thinking of this criminal. So basically, that's my story. But what, yeah.
Yeah, Jared, if you don't mind, I'll come in there. So Jared was messaging me saying, this fella's a scam. He's a scamster. It's not working. But the hold Gettier had on me, I said, no. He's told me he's the most generous, honest person in the world. He's for real. And Gerard's saying, no, he's a fraudster. And I'm saying, no, he's good. And in the end, I remember I can see the text. Jared said, oh, well, I'm giving up on this. And it took me a while to realize there was other things. And then it was just too stupid to go on. Things were just too bad. That's why I reported him. But another thing that you might find interesting, this fella has had evaded law enforcement for years. Gerard found out, like, probably going back 20 years. I'd met his auntie and uncle through, they saw my first documentary. They then reached out to me. Right from the early days, they had suspected him of being a fraudster, a criminal. He had excommunicated them from the family. And the auntie, and she's completely open with me saying this, I messaged her early. Her sister is Gettier's mum. He had split the family so much, they didn't speak to the auntie and uncle for 3 years. They only made back up when they saw my documentary. About a month after that, the dad died, and then about a year after that, the mum died. So this lady is furious that she missed out on that time with the mum and dad. But another amazing story. The auntie and uncle live in Southampton, over 60, don't have any kids. They have a small place in Malaga. They go there. So December 2016, Gettier went over there with the family to stay with them and see him, to try and convert them back, saying I'm a good guy. He got there and he said, oh, I wouldn't mind buying a place around here. They said, oh, we'll put you in touch with a real estate agent. So they did, one of their friends. He met the real estate agent. The real estate agent said, what's your budget? He said, 8.5 million euro. Well, the real estate agent couldn't believe it. He said, I've got a place for you. It was up in a gated community behind Malaga, La Zagaleta. And Gettier used to show me the pictures of this place. They're owned by a Russian. Gettier saw it and he said, I'll buy it. Now, the auntie and uncle went with Gettier, his wife, and Gettier's mum and dad to look at this property. The uncle was astute enough, he secretly recorded the meeting on his iPhone in his pocket. And yeah, the Russian ladies, oh, here it is, like ceiling, floor to ceiling windows, big infinity pool, massive. You can imagine what 8.5 million buys you. And Gettier said, I'll buy it. So the Russian guy said, no problem. He's getting offers to buy it over the next few days, and he's saying, I've already got a buyer. The real estate agent said to Gettier, I need 10% deposit, 850,000. He said, no worries, I'll get it to you by Friday. Anyway, the money wasn't coming through. Gettier went in to see the real estate agent. He broke down in front of him, said, been a con man all my life. I've got no money. My life's a disaster. I'm going to go and kill myself. Now, this real estate agent had a good friend of his commit suicide a few months before that, so he was very aware of this. So the real estate agent got the auntie and uncle together and said, look, he's hot-legged it to the airport. We need to call Gatwick police to tell them we've got a flight risk on our hands. 2 hours on the phone with Gatwick police, they convinced them. They picked him up at the airport with the family. This is December 2016. They gave him a blue light escort from Gatwick to Virginia Water. It's about an hour to make sure he was all right. September 2017, 9 months later, the very week he started work at Bank of America, the auntie and uncle were called in by Surrey police and um, interviewed under caution for being drug dealers. And they said, don't ever disturb Mr. Gettier again. He's a fine, upstanding, honest member of society. Stay away from him. But we've got our eye on you because we think you're drug dealers. So he'd managed to turn the story around and convince the police he was innocent. This was the third time he'd talked his way out of this with the police, and put the poor auntie and uncle in the hot oil. They couldn't believe it. That's why they were so prepared to reach out to me when they saw my documentary. And the filming of Gettier and the family at the Russian oligarch's place in up the back of Malaga, I've got on YouTube, and it's out there. It will be in the film if I can get a film going. So these are the sort of tricks this fellow was able to do.
Wayne, allow me if I may to come in there, Wayne. This is
Please.
absolutely fascinating. So it's obvious that the crook was an out and out crook.
Out now.
It's obvious that he acted in a premeditated way.
Yep.
It's obvious he may well have had all kinds of. I'm not giving him an excuses here at all. It's obvious he must have had all kinds of psychological issues going on in his head, because how can you possibly think of getting away with the scam that he was trying to inflict on you? Because it's just a matter of time before the money doesn't come through, and then it's not like you didn't know where the bloke was or what he looked like.
I know.
There's almost an insanity about it. So
Yeah.
all of that can go in a box called the bloke was an absolute ballon and he was a crook, right?
Yep. Yep.
Bank of America.
Yep.
Right. What is it that seems to be enabling Bank of America to completely wash its hand of any responsibilities when the activity took place, at least in part, on the premises,
Yeah.
when he was fraudulently exploiting his role at Bank of America,
Yep.
when the communications was going through Bank of America systems,
Yep.
when the data side of what was going on was inside Bank of America's environment. There's a long list of reasons why it's obvious that Bank of America played innocently. I'm not suggesting for a moment they were complicit in it, although that's another conversation maybe. But Bank of America were so obviously unintentionally enabling him to do what he did. So the question is, what's wrong with our law, our structure, our systems, our governance that enables an organization to, it would seem, completely bypass any responsibility whatsoever, and not even, it would seem, to be challenged by the authorities and to be investigated in terms of checks and balances and controls? That's the bit that's completely melting my little brain here, because crooks are crooks. They come up with all kinds of cunning ways to do their dastardly stuff. That's kind of accepted. But the Bank of America sidestepping any responsibility is the bit that I'm really worried about, because, you take out insurances like public liability insurance and employer insurances and all kinds of things that you must have. How can it be that Bank of America is washing its hand of any responsibilities? And why is it that the regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, or any of the other authorities seem uninterested in asking them the awkward questions that seem to be put to them? That's where this conversation goes for me, Wayne.
And you're spot on, Andy. And what the Bank of America's defense and the ICO's defense also was that I wasn't a customer. Now, under GDPR, there's no concept of customer, it's all personal data. So after about 6 months, they finally agreed, said, yes, personal data, they should have protected your data. So then I got to the point of when is an organization responsible for a person's data? You know what? I put that into ChatGPT. I can't get any answers out of the authorities, out of experts. They don't want to answer. Straight away, ChatGPT came back and said, as soon as any organization captures your data, it can be on paper, it doesn't even have to go into their tech systems. They are legally responsible for protecting your data. Therefore, my data went into Bank of America systems. The Bank of America, under the way GDPR should be interpreted, they were aware of my data. So while they can say they didn't know about it, the organization did. Therefore, the people in the organisation did. They haven't made that leap, but I think they know it and they're squashing it. But you're spot on, Andy. These people think they are so big, and I think, John, you put the word in the chat about it. They are so big, Andy, they are not frightened to take on the law.
See, that's where we have a problem in our systems. I forget who it was chatting to us the other day. I know it was Nigel Keynes. On a completely different matter, Nigel's here tonight. On a completely different matter, Nigel was explaining to me and others this morning, was it this morning or yesterday? The days blur. About how a lady who has a really strong case, it would seem, because she had to act as a litigant in person without any legal representation at all, was completely treated, it would seem, in a harsh way by the judge. The point I'm making is there seems to be a correlation between how much money you've got and your chances of getting justice. And there's obviously something fundamentally wrong there because if Bank of America has been able to use its money and its power to prevent justice from happening, then somebody somewhere is responsible for that. There's loads of interesting stuff in the chat. I can see Bruce has put his hand up. We'll go to Bruce in a moment, Wayne. This is such a lively conversation. But let's go to Bruce now. Bruce, if you don't mind, please take a moment to introduce yourself because you've put a few interesting things in the chat, and it'd be nice to hear from you, Bruce. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Andy, for convening this, and Wayne. Your pain is something I haven't experienced in the way you have, but it is a violation of your own sovereignty in a sense, and I feel that very deeply. In a one sentence, Bank of America sued me and my sister as beneficiaries to hold on to and stop the timely distribution of my father's trust money. And they raided the trust to the tune of $400,000 to pay their high-priced lawyers. And I am a lawyer in 3 states, in California, New York, and Pennsylvania. I spent $100,000. So we're totaling $500,000 to get my distribution. So the point I wanted to make, and I posted the link to an article that just came out called Broken Trust, is that their business model as a bank is to use their power to dispense with accountability. And so, for example, the release that I was required to sign, or that they asked me to sign to get my money, which under the law they cannot do, okay, included a non-disparagement clause. Non-disparagement meaning I won't talk bad about them, aside from a confidentiality and other clauses. I don't want to go on and on with this. You can read in the law review article the quote hypothetical of this. What I want to point out to Andy and those on the call is that there's shame for all of us in being victimized. We do feel violated. I won't analogize it to other crimes of personal character, but it is a violative act emotionally. Yeah. And so we need to come together and, as maybe Andy is doing and some others, post these issues and how they have happened, because they've tried to the banks Bank of America being one, have tried to snuff it out to keep us quiet
Yeah.
and to profit from it. What in my case, holding on to the what's called AUM, assets under management, for an extra 2 years was a way to stem the outflow of wealth managed funds. They make commissions on AUM, assets under management, and there was a 15 to 20% outflow of AUM in the years for which they were conducting themselves this way. The other thing I'll mention is the U.S. regulators, and I teach finance and ethics at Stanford.
Do you?
Aside from being a lawyer in 3 states and practicing finance law, the regulators, I contacted 21 of Bank of America's favorite regulators in the United States and said, this is wrong. And 3 weeks later, to snuff out a response to a regulator, they sued me and my sister, saying this is now in litigation. So they've played these games really well. The trust code has a lot of gotcha games in it, which the article points out. So we need to be very vocal in this shamed or ashamed victimizations. And so I applaud you trying to do the documentary. There needs to be a kind of this registry, almost like a what do we call it? Politico, not Politico. The political group that investigates this stuff. Yeah. So I'll stop there. Brian has his hand raised, but hopefully some of that makes sense.
We'll go to Brian in a moment, and we'll go back to Wayne in a moment. But I just want to speak to something that's come to the front of my mind, hearing Bruce speak. Bruce, it's great to have you here. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. You're clearly a man with a sense of purpose about you. Folks, some of you will be aware I'm involved with Violation Tracker, and this is the Violation Tracker database of the infringements by organizations, either Bank of America itself or organizations who are part of the Bank of America empire, for want of a better phrase. And it's basically a case-by-case documentation of the bank's violations. And I've ranked it by when they were. So you'll see here 2024. So it starts with the most recent. And I'm going to make a point, which is, I think, a very, very serious point. So you can see here, just scrolling down on the offence category column, which is the 4th one into the left, it's been guilty of investor protection violations, banking violations, privacy violations, consumer protection violations, anti-money laundering deficiencies. It goes on. Discriminatory practices. It goes on and it goes on. Labour standards violations. So when Wayne was speaking earlier about those kind of platitudes about their mission and their values and all those ethics things, it's worth questioning the sincerity of those statements when it has been so guilty. And remember, this is just what they've been caught doing. God knows how much they've done that hasn't resulted in a fine or an infringement. So big question mark over Bank of America being fined so much for doing so many bad things. But what about the regulators? If the primary purpose of a conduct regulator, for example, the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, if its primary purpose is to mandate for good conduct in the market, then why is it using such a broken methodology for making good conduct happen? Because the methodology clearly is about finding the organization. Who pays those fines? The shareholders do, the innocent shareholders, by way of their savings schemes and their ISAs and their pension funds. But the individuals in the banks responsible for the malpractice carry on doing the same thing over and over again. It's like there's no feedback loop. There's no mechanism for correcting the behavior, because nobody who is guilty is feeling any pain as a consequence for it. All they're probably doing is maybe having the odd bonus removed. There's something systemically wrong with the entire governance and oversight of this area. So when we hear of a case like Wayne's, and it looks like the FCA is completely uninterested, my goodness me, that should be sending alarm bells, you know? Red flags being vociferously waved that a massive, massive fraud has gone almost uninterested. We're going to go to Brian Hall, who put a very good point in the chat a few moments ago. Perhaps Brian's going to be speaking to that. And folks, by the way, Brian, like people like Nigel Keynes, who's here tonight, is a wonderful volunteer for TGF. We only do what we can do through the work of our volunteers like Brian Hall. Brian, over to you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely agree that there's a sort of an enormous amount of psychological damage that's done, and there's some research that I looked into at one stage when I was doing my own work. I can't remember who wrote it. It was a credible source. This organization had, I think it's a charity, or it may have been the Office of Fair Trading at the time, did this research. And they really hammered home the sort of damage that these sorts of scams and scandals do to an individual. You know, it's almost like a PTSD thing, because, you know, we go through life and we have a model of who we are and how the world functions and our place within the world. And then something like this comes along, and it actually, you know, really just shakes us to our core. So, you know, it shouldn't be underestimated how much psychological damage something like this does. And one of the key things I remember, one of the statements was that, you know, one of the things that people struggle with is the fact that they blame themselves for being so stupid, in inverted commas, for this, you know, being taken in by it. How could they be taken in by it? But in actual fact, the behavior is so outside the norm that you just would never think that any individual or organization could behave in this sort of way. So it's a real shock to the system when it actually happens, and one then has to do a big reset in terms of one's outlook on the world, which is a very traumatic thing to do. So I think that's a very important point that was raised. Another thing that struck me is that I recognize why you're going down the information commissioner's route and the data and all of that sort of thing. But there might be other ways of approaching this. Maybe because if you're hammering at the same door all the time, and they're just sort of reinforcing it, bolstering the door to stop you getting through, because they've already taken a stand and they don't want to have to take a step back from that. Maybe look at alternatives as well. So one of the things that struck me was fitness and proprietary standards. So in the UK, regulated firms are required to ensure fitness and propriety of their employees. Well, clearly they failed in that, because this guy, they recruited him, they employed him. Now maybe he, you know, jumped through hoops to get himself employed, but, you know, regardless, a regulated firm is required to take responsibility for the fitness and propriety of their employees. And in the chat, I put in a link to the handbook. And that's quite important as well, I think, because I'll go on to talk about principles of business, which are important as well. But rule books are actionable by consumers, by individuals, where principles of business are not. So it may be that Steve Middleton, for example, is somebody I think you've probably met in the group, who does work with FCA rulebooks with a degree of success because they are actionable. So that might be just something to look at. And then similarly, the core of the FCA's regulatory principles, their principles of business, it seems to be that Bank of America have breached a couple of those. PRIN 1, which is integrity, which demands that firms must conduct its business with integrity. And PRIN 2, which is skill, care, and diligence. So it demands a firm must conduct its business with due skill, care, and diligence. And these are sort of a recurring thing all the way through these sorts of principles of diligence and skill and so on. You know, there is a duty of care. And the duty of care is based on those sorts of principles. Now, obviously, they would argue, well, you're not a customer and so on and so forth. you know, there's enough stuff in there to be very damaging to the Bank of England's reputation, I think. So that's my sort of overarching thought is, you know, maybe look at other ways of approaching it, maybe getting some advice on some of those aspects. I'd be happy to do a little bit of research, see if I can find some more for you. I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but I've sort of done research in that area. But, you know, I think there are grounds for embarrassing Bank of America significantly and damaging their reputation. So maybe that's an angle to take.
Thanks, Brian.
Let's go back to Wayne. We've covered a fair bit since Wayne's last spoken, so perhaps Wayne can reflect.
We've got Lisa with a hand up. Can we just do Lisa first, then I'll pick it up. Andy?
Of course.
Go for it, Lisa.
Lisa, as always, it's lovely to have you with us. Lisa, over to you. Thank you.
Hello, Andy. Hello, Wayne. I watched your documentary, one of your documentaries yesterday, and I was shocked by it, actually, by the callousness of your neighbour as he was. But your wife and your family are obviously very supportive of you, and that's lovely to see. Lovely for you to have that, and I'm sorry that you've gone through what you're going through, of which I can sympathise, as Andy knows. So I try to be as succinct as I can. This is, again, I'm a victim, and so was my late husband, of one of the largest UK mortgage lenders in the UK, Lloyds Banking Group. In 2013, this is how long it goes back, my husband was ill, and he phoned the bank to tell them that he was ill and he needed their help and guidance. Really, all he needed, or we needed, was a change into our mortgage rate. That's all we needed, but that didn't happen. So for years, they put us on a payment holiday, which we didn't want, but we did. We took it because that's what they offered us. That's all they offered us, even though my husband kept on asking for the mortgage to be changed, and they would say, no, we don't do that. And on it went. So obviously the arrears were mounting up now, and the threats were getting more and more serious for the repossession of our home. And they knew my husband was very ill. And they continued with their threats. And in 2014, he attempted suicide. Now, I shared with the group a few weeks ago the exact attempt of what it was. I'm not going to go into it now because it's too painful. And on it went for years. And we got the help. We went to court 4 times, and they lied to the court. They withheld information, as they do, and it turned out that we were victims of a mortgage redress scheme. That the FCA were actually in the bank's offices investigating them for mistreating vulnerable mortgage borrowers by not offering them better deals on their mortgages. So we were lucky to have the support, and the group TTF know him, Paul Carlier. And his due diligence and investigation, we discovered that the bank knew what they were doing to us and 526,000 victims. But ours was one of the worst cases. They knew what they were doing, and the FCA knew what they were doing, but they didn't do anything to help us. The FCA would say, we don't get involved in individual cases. That's not what we do. You've got to go to the Financial Ombudsman Service, which we did do, but they found in the bank's favour, wrongly. And on it went. There was so much we discovered. I can't even fill it into this chat. There is so much, but Andy knows everything about what they've did to us.
Lisa, is it your feeling that the kind of culture that must exist in a bank, like the bank that harmed yourself and your husband, is it your feeling that the culture must be so rotten, so toxic in some parts of it? Obviously, we're not saying every bank employee is rotten. That's not the case, obviously. But is it your feeling that the culture must be so bad for it to do what it did to yourself and your husband and 500,000 other people, and for it to be doing what it's doing to Wayne? Is it your feeling that there must be almost something toxic there, something poisonous there, something quite bad there for it to kind of sleep at nights and carry on doing this kind of stuff?
It is toxic, and they only think of themselves, and they think of the promotion they're going to get up the promotional ladder. But we must also remember that a fish rots from the head down. So it comes from the top. That culture that exists across all banks, obviously in Bank of America, that's unbelievable. But in Lloyd's Banking Group as well, we know from the previous CEO and chair that they knew what was going on. They knew about HBOS Reading. They knew about BSU. They knew, just as RBS, GRG, they knew all that was going on, and they just think of themselves and the promotion that it will get. Because if a bank produces these huge profits, we know in the UK they're going to get knighted and they're going to receive huge bonuses, and the Treasury are going to protect them at all costs, as will the judiciary system, because they are some superheroes for making so much money. But what all this money that they're making is on the backs of victims, Wayne, me, my late husband, and all the others that have gone before and that are coming through now, and all the members on TTF of all the stories we hear. They're all those that should protect us are all complacent in what they're doing to us. It's like the FCA. They knew what they were doing, but because of their ingrained dislike of one person, that being Paul Carlier, who we know is well respected throughout the industry because he gets to the truth, and they don't like it. So because we were aligned with him, they were going to take us down to make a point about him, to ruin him, to get to him. They would go through us, and they did, because my husband's not here anymore. But what I'm doing now, I have a repossession hearing in 2 weeks' time. And you know, Andy, you spoke to one of their representatives before Christmas. And the way he spoke to you, and the way he implied that you were helping me for your own gratitude was appalling, absolutely appalling.
Lisa, we all know there's so much appalling going on in the system that just has to be.
So what I'm doing now is I have got a lot of evidence, and I'm writing to the coroner's office to have an inquest opened into my husband's passing, because they are complicit in him not being here anymore. And I've named every single one of them.
You've done the right thing, Lisa.
From the bank, every single one of them. And we know it goes to the top. Now, I don't know if it will do any good, but I'm doing that, and I am sending the copy to Charlie Nunn, so he knows that if I go to court in 2 weeks' time, that the coroner's office is already aware of their involvement in my husband's premature passing, and possibly mine, because Lisa, I cannot take any more.
I'm in the same place. Well, not quite the same place. I know where you're headed. We should have a talk later on this week, because I've got repossession hearings coming up, but I might have some ideas for you. It's horrible, I know. But let's stick together on this.
Yeah, Lisa, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we had an event in Parliament a few months ago. There was a big round of applause for Lisa for relentlessly pushing to defend herself and her late husband. And I think we ought to show our appreciation once again, not just to Lisa's tenacity, but also Peter, her late husband's, and also Wayne's. Lisa, there's so much we learn from you and are inspired by you. Thank you, Lisa. Let's go back to Wayne. We have about 10 minutes or so. There's so much that's come out of this conversation already. Are there any particular points that you want to make sure we cover off before we get to 7:30-ish wrap-up time?
Yeah, I'll go through these quickly, Andy, because I know we've spoken about a lot, and thanks everybody. You've been totally brilliant. The first one is victims don't speak up. We mentioned earlier about this fella must have known he was going to get caught, but he's got away with it for so long, and victims don't speak up, which irritates me more because I was never going to lay down and say, oh, that's okay, rip me off for 200,000, just go away. I went after him, and I won the day I spoke up and he got put in jail. So I'm always going to be a winner, and I take that with me. The other things I want to touch on, this fella, the Gettier, he told one lady who went after him for the money that he'd been in America. It was all lies, and he'd landed a big job, and over there that there was a car accident. His daughter got injured, so he couldn't talk to her. So she gave it a few weeks. She went back. He said, look, his daughter had died and he was planning a funeral. That's the extent these people go to. I bet the daughter feels thankful that she's got such a loving dad. But this is what they do. So when on the last call I had with him, when he knew I was the one who spoke up, he told me he was going to send around people with guns and baseball bats to get us. We got out of the house for the day because we were told to get out. The other thing, the 6 times I went into Bank of America, not once did they check my bags as I went through. I've gone and stood in the foyer there, but they're on a lookout for people who don't report to the front desk now, so that's changed. They don't check the bags of employees going through security. So if this fellow was such a callous and unfeeling person, he could have easily been taking parts of a homemade bomb in there. He could have built a bomb inside. No one would have known. He could have detonated that remotely, caused a lot of carnage. Bank of America is supposed to be experts on managing risk. That could have easily happened. I see Bank of America are the major sponsor of the upcoming FIFA World Cup in 2026. I'm posting every time I see it. How do they know they haven't got employees planning to bomb stadiums or something? If you get a terrorist in there, like this guy got through vetting so easily. These people get in and they can create little terror cells, and hell knows what they do. And once they do that, they can't be stopped. They just go for it. And the other thing, Bruce, we've got your man, MAGA. He's gone for Moynihan. So Donald Trump has called Moynihan out a few weeks ago for Bank of America not accepting conservatives as customers. He's got Moynihan on the back foot. I don't know if you've got a speed dial to Donald to get him to give this information, but I don't know what's happening in the world. But anyway, people, that's my story. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Gerard, for speaking. Thanks, everybody who spoke. Andy, thanks for organising this. Also, Chelsea and Alex, and I really do appreciate your support, everyone. Thank you.
Wayne, we're going to talk about an area that I think is really, really important. So one of the things I put in the chat earlier was a link to our publication about Faces of Financial Crime, which is 22 case studies of people who've been victims of financial crime, whether that's by crooks acting independently or banking misconduct victims, etc. And the big point that comes out of that publication is there's a woeful lack of care and attention to people who are victims of financial crime. It's as if the idea of financial crime isn't really a crime and somehow it's a victimless crime. What are your candid thoughts about what it's like trying to get support and help from the relevant authorities in the UK when somebody does unfortunately become the victim of a criminal like you and your family did?
So, Andy, I don't class myself as a silly person. I think I'm quite switched on in a lot of ways. Um, the I think I mentioned earlier, the way I've been treated by the authorities, I can't believe. The ones who I thought would be all over me have been the exact opposite. They've made my life hell. And like Lisa, I concur with you. The energy, it just takes it all out of you. I've been at the point many times where I just don't have the energy to keep going to fight this stuff because the walls are there. Like the ICO, that's their job. It's all written down in their regulations what they have to do. They ignore it. The police, they miss so much stuff. I can understand why Sarah Everhard's parents are furious. And mine hasn't involved death like that, but they miss so much stuff. I got an email from one policeman saying, "Shut up and keep my mouth closed and stop annoying them, or else they'd just come and get me." Uh, not in those blunt words, but that was the message. Andy, I can't say anymore. They are useless.
And let's talk about the FCA. You know, Wayne, that
Yeah.
Transparency Task Force and the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Investment Fraud and Fairer Financial Services is quite concerned about the performance of the FCA. So could you summarise for us what the FCA have done, if anything, to try to help you and to try to help you get justice as a consequence of the malpractice and criminality of a Bank of America employee, Bank of America being an entity regulated by the FCA in the UK? Let's remind ourselves. What have the FCA done?
Right. So I reported it to them. As I think Lisa said, they say we don't deal with individual cases. So came up across another brick wall there. I sent them in so much stuff, and I did have probably one or two decent calls with him, but that was it. I called back the person, and he says he won't give me an update on the case because it's confidential. The stuff I send through, he says he has put it against the case number and it sits there. I said, well, I've not seen any action reported on your website about anything you've done to Bank of America. He says, we can't update you on anything because it's confidential. They've done absolutely zero for me, Andy.
Shocking, absolutely shocking. And in law, have you been able to find a lawyer or somebody who's sufficiently knowledgeable to establish whether Bank of America in law do have a duty of care of some kind over the conduct, over a victim of the employee's conduct? Where are we on that?
Yeah, so we've got all that. Yes, they do have a duty of care. They said not so much for people who aren't customers. There is like I went to the Financial Ombudsman Service that they tried, but they're pretty useless, really. That they don't fight very hard. Um, I've found a lot of legal terms that support me, but the problem is lawyers don't work for minimum wage. Uh, they want paying. I've got one good lawyer who's helped me, but to stump up and go to like the High Court, well, it costs you 10 grand straight away to lodge anything. The Bank of America, as soon as I do that, would then say, well, he's not got much chance of winning. He can't satisfy adverse costs, which could be several million. It's a waste of time. Don't even bother starting the case off. Uh, yeah, they all smile, Andy, but no one's you know, prepared to stump up the money. I went to litigation funding, got quite a way down the track. I mentioned that on TTF meetings. I thought we were going to get somewhere. Then the litigator said, well, you should have seen this coming. Foreseeability, they said. I thought, well, I exposed this guy after 15 months. He was at the Bank of America for 3 years. They didn't see it coming. So we've got nowhere with all that.
Remarkable. Folks, we'll throw it right open to anybody else that wants to come in with any comments or questions. So please do raise your hand either literally or digitally We're going to go back to Bruce. Back to you, Bruce. Thank you, Bruce in Stamford.
So, thank you for letting us have this conversation. So Wayne, I see what you are going through, and as you could read, what I've gone through. This is a massive failing of our justice systems and regulatory systems. And to combat that, I'm part of many things at Stanford, one of which is the Center for Legal Informatics, or how do you computerize the law to work for more people? Typically, we work on how do we computerize the law so the lawyers can make more money, or the corporate general counsel can be more effective. So I've started, as of last week, something called A2J for all, meaning access to justice for all, using AI. And soon, not today, but soon you'll be able to go to a2jforall.org and see some of the work. I'll put that in the chat. And so the concept is, and I don't want to belabor it on this call, but if you're interested, just reach out.
I will.
That there are, as Andy suggested, there are many legal theories of recovery that a specific set of facts give rise to, and we've heard some of them on this call. What if we tell an AI agent to assume the role of a lawyer for a second, and propose all of those routes to recovery? I call that outcome viability. And then will a lawyer take the case? I call pragmatic viability. So you have the law on your side, theoretically, but will a lawyer actually take the case? And yes, there are significant barriers. Then there's the ultimate justice moment. And that's whether you actually get justice. The distance between outcome viability, you technically have rights of recovery, through pragmatic viability to ultimate justice can be a big journey. But with AI, you can come to that solution faster. And in showing outcome viability to a bank like Bank of America, you can show them they're on the losing side. And if we were, Andy, not to look at the cases that result in penalties, because those are a pittance, a fraction of the catch and kill variety of activities that these banks are doing. They're silencing people from pursuing claims, or they've made it so expensive to make the claim. So that's not a good indicator of the rate at which they are abusing people, as Lisa and others have shown. But if you were to capture more with greater fidelity the full volume of buckets of abuses, you would then have, in an automated AI way, a way to file class actions in the US, or to file individual arbitration claims that would overwhelm their systems of catch and kill. So I just want you to hear that legal tech may be an avenue to combine the individual harms, into something much more salient and threatening to them. Sorry to go on.
No, it's all right, Bruce. Thanks for that. I'm trying to link in with you. It says you're financial innovator on Earth and in outer space and in between. But I need your email address to link in, so maybe I'll get that later and do that.
Yeah. I'll arrange for Alexander to connect to you, Bruce. That's really interesting. We're going to go to Brian Hall, then we're going to go to Mr. Mark Bannister, who has made it quite traditional to almost close some of our events recently. Mark's got a great kind of macro perspective on all these things. Mr. Brian Hall, then we go to Mark, then we'll wrap up. Sorry, Brian, Mark, Wayne for his final words.
I've got a few points, but I'll be very quick. First of all, Wayne, I would like to say that I don't see you as a victim. I really don't. I think there's an engineering term, stress and strain. It's put something under stress, you take the stress away and it bounces back the way it was before. Strain is when something is fundamentally damaged, you take the stress away and the thing just is bent. And I see you're under enormous stress, but I don't think you're strained. I think if you could reach a resolution on this, we wouldn't recognize you. You would be off there and you would be living your full life and everything. And I just, it's one of the things I just wanted to run past you is I do find you inspirational. The fact that I can see the stress you're under at times, but you just keep going. And I take my hat off to you. So I don't see you as a victim. I see you as something else. We need a new vocabulary to describe somebody like yourself. So I take my hat off to you. Bruce, I would love to glaze with you on your thoughts on 2 counts. First of all, professionally, I spent a number of years designing systems for automatic underwriting, which is where you take all of the lending policies of a lender and you convert it into executable code, and working out ways of making that easy so users could maintain those sorts of rules bases. Now, AI is a different thing again. The AI works out for itself what rules it's going to apply, but the same sort of mindset applies. And also, I've been doing a lot of work in recent years looking at all the different regulations that might apply in the UK for various different malfeasance. And there's all sorts of pieces of legislation that people don't even think about. And there's all sorts of different overlaps and so on. And an AI tool would be ideal for bringing all those sorts of things together. So if you'd want to, I've got your LinkedIn page. I'll connect with you, but I'd love to talk to you about that and see if there's any way I can help you, because I think it's an excellent idea. Andy, I'd just like to say thank you again to you, because one of the things that you do is you bring all these people together. And it provides such succor for us all, really. It's almost like I think you should franchise this around the world, because it's a brilliant thing and it adds real value. So thank you, Andy. And the final thing is, Lisa, my heart goes out to you. It really does. And I'd love to connect with you, because there may be things that I can do that can help you moving forward. I've done a lot of work already in what you're planning to do, and it may be that you can use what I've done as ammunition. So after this call is over, I'll drop you a line and I'll send you something that might be of interest. So that's all I've got to say.
Super stuff. Thank you very much indeed, Brian Hall. Mr. Mark Bannister. Then we'll go to Wayne for his final words for tonight.
I'd like to thank everybody who's contributed to this evening's call. I certainly agree with Brian. I don't think Wayne's a victim. As a lot of you know, I resolutely refuse to consider myself a victim. I'm yet to be a victor, but I am working at that, and we all should adopt that philosophy in that regard. Again, you will all have heard me say in past calls that we need responsibility, we need accountability, and we need consequence. And possibly the K should be knowledge of the crime, because all of these people know. I'm fed up with hearing about Bank of America or anybody else, or RBS or Lloyd's Bank. There are people. A corporate entity does not operate by itself. It operates by the people that run it and the people that staff it, and they all have responsibilities when they walk out of the door in the evening back to their families, and they know that they have to drive on the right side of the road or the left-hand side of the road, depending on which country you're in. They know that they can't go round raping every good-looking woman that they see. They know that they can't go and punch everybody that they don't like on the tube, and so on and so forth. There are rules, and we need to ensure that people understand that there are rules and ethics and responsibilities inside the office or inside the corporate culture, and that they can't just become subsumed to their need to earn their salary and their paycheck, because ultimately they too can become a victim of all of this. But there is great hope I see, and I want to just speak to a personal experience, and I phoned Wayne and discussed this with him this morning. I've begun using ChatGPT and Claude and some of the other AI engines, and they are a game changer. And last night I had the bright idea of sticking in the latest legal letter that I had received into it and saying to the engines, right, do an analysis of this and tell me what the strengths and weaknesses of this letter and rate it. Give me a rating out of 10. The letter was rated by the engines 2 out of 10. Basically, it's appalling. It's completely ignores all the laws that pertain to the matter that they have in hand and all the rest of it. And it shows you that all of these lawyers are nowhere near as good as they pretend to be. And in fact, many of them are extremely weak. And what I think is going to happen is that the AI engine is just going to find these kids out. And the other thing is, if we are brave and we put all our frauds and our manipulations into them, then the AI engines become stronger because they know what to look for. We've talked earlier about this evening about not being humiliated and keeping ourselves, not speaking out. Well, we've got to speak out to these engines, because once they see the patterns, they'll destroy all these people. And then finally, we've got to get to a point where the courts recognize that they've got to apply all of this knowledge, not be partial, not twist it and so on. And I think AI again is going to do that. I think it's going to find all the judges out. And the last thing I'll say on all of this is, I can see a circumstance, and I hope Bruce is listening because he teaches all of this, where you as a lawyer can't get insurance. Okay, you just know, because nobody's going to take your PI or your D&O insurance, because it's a hostage to fortune. And if I were an insurance, right, with a back, because they're all insured today, I'd be terrified, because I think there's just a mass liability sitting out there that suddenly you can unearth and you can see, and you'll be able to go back and say, hey, Mr. Lawyer, I paid you $100,000 and you did a shit job and I want my money back. And I think you stand a good chance of getting it. And so suddenly all of these law firms, right, could be in huge threat. And then where do the corporates go? Who's going to defend them? I foresee, there's an old economics adage, and this is my final point. The cure for high prices is high prices, because you kill off demand. The cure for low prices is low prices, because you kill off supply. Okay, once that happens, then you get a sea change. It is always the way in life. And I just see the legal community have no concept of the danger that they are under. And the final thing I'll say on the letter, that I ran it through, I sat there thinking, oh my God, it highlighted a single point, and this you should all take away: the utter arrogance of these people. Because they cannot have said, they should have put their own letter through an engine to check it was good enough. And of course they didn't, because otherwise they would never have sent it to me, because it's just a massive liability to them. Anyway, that's my contribution to you. There is hope. It will take time, but it's coming at speed. And there's a pendulum effect. And when it pivots, the speed takes, it's slow to start with, but once you come up to the fulcrum, then it accelerates at a massive rate, and suddenly it's all changed. So there we are. That's it. Thank you.
Mark, fantastic input from you, as is so often the case. In just a few moments, we're going to be going back to Wayne for his final words, but I wanted to share with you some thoughts, some old thoughts that are remarkably relevant to the conversation we've been having tonight. There's been much said about tenacity and sticking at it, and folks like Lisa, folks like Wayne really are exemplars in relation to their determination. And a lot of what they're doing is about speaking out, and it's about never giving up, and it's about recognizing that we, the people, do have power, particularly when we get organized and strategized and mobilized. I'll read these out in case the writing's too small for you to see. So Robert F. Kennedy, back in the late 60s. Every time we turn our heads the other way, when we see the law flouted, when we tolerate what we know to be wrong, when we close our eyes and ears to the corrupt because we are too busy or too frightened, when we fail to speak up and speak out, we strike a blow against freedom and decency and justice. Those words, to my mind, folks, encapsulate so much of our collective endeavour. Next, we go to Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. And I can't conceive of better words about the spirit of determination and tenacity are better than these. Martin Luther King. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. You have to keep moving forward. You have to keep moving forward. Wayne, you've got the final word, sir. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Andy. Thank you all. Thanks to those who rang me today. There was a lot of people who did to offer support. I was a little bit worried about where you're going with some of those analogies you come out with there, Mark. But I'm pleased that we got there. Yeah, all I'm going to say is Andy. I had no other group where I've got any support. Since I've walked into the doors of TTF, I've had nothing but support, friendship, camaraderie, ideas. This is where it happens, and you and your team and everyone in TTF is responsible for that. Thanks for tonight. It's been magnificent. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks everybody for giving your time. Thanks for those people from overseas who've dialed in. I could just say thank you very much, and I've really enjoyed it, and I appreciate everything you've done. Thank you.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. Well done, Wayne. Well done, Wayne. Back to Wayne's World. Thanks all. We'll wrap it up there tonight, but there's going to be many conversations off the back of tonight's conversation. Thank you all very much indeed. Good night.
Thanks all.
Good night.
See you.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.